Here and here I have two saws for cutting curves, and with this one it's got a tiny little blade that can do really tight curves. You can basically turn on the spot with this one. The downside is you can't do very thick material because this tiny blade overheats from the friction and snaps. This one can do much thicker material, but because the blade is so much longer, it also has to be taller, and that restricts how tight curves you can cut. This one is really only good for kind of long sweeping curves. So what I want to make is something that's in between these sizes, something that can do tighter curves than this one, but thicker material than this one. Gramercy Tools comes to the rescue. Not sponsored, I guess I should say that. Here I have their 12-inch coping saw blades and the brass pins that can hold on to these blades. You can make such pins yourself from like threaded rod. I decided not to. I wanted to save some time, and these are really nice for the price. They have a little flange which takes up the tension so that the tension isn't on the handle itself. So yeah, that's the plan. Let's make a coping saw. The first step was to pick some wood for the frame, and I went with ash. You'll want something strong for the arms because there will be a lot of tension. Something like beech or hickory would be perfect as well. The beam can be anything, even softwood honestly, since it's only in compression. But I could get all my parts out of this ash board, so I just used that. After sawing, I squared up the parts to prepare for the joints. I found the middle of my frame arms. It doesn't have to be the exact middle, but you'll want it somewhere centered. The width of the beam was marked with knife nicks, transferred to the other arm, and squared across the edge. With the beam location decided, I sketched the shape of the arms. This can kind of be anything you want, including no shaping at all, but I wanted to have some fun with it and throw in some curves. This piece then is the beam, and now I had to find the length of it, 10 on shoulder to 10 on shoulder, by laying the blade and pins on it and marking how much room they need. The tenons can be super short here. They are not a glue surface, they serve only to keep the arms from falling off sideways. The frame is held together entirely by the tension of the blade and a twisted cord that will be added later, so this little stub is all you need. The tenon location was then scribed onto the arms, using the earlier knife marks for location, and the mortise was cut. Next I made the hole through the arms for the brass pins, drilling from both directions and meeting in the middle to get the best shot at squareness. I placed the blade and pins onto the frame at this point to see how much of the arms I need to trim to allow the parts to reach. This needs to be done because of the flange on the pins, which give them a fixed length. If you're screwing your handles onto threaded rod pins, you have flexibility there, and this step can be skipped. But with the flanges, this is the kind of fit you want here. Notice that the tenon shoulder is slightly open. That's how we'll be able to tension the blade. Sometimes you see this kind of saw frame with curved tenon shoulders. That negates the need for a gap, but is much more difficult to fit neatly. But that is basically it for the frame as far as functionality goes. From here it's just aesthetics, and this can be done a few ways. I have my larger turning saw, so I could use that for some of these curves. But another equally viable way is to make a series of crosscuts down to the line and then chop out the waste with a chisel. On both the sawn and chiseled surfaces I cleaned up with a spoke shave and rasp and file in the tighter curves. On the upper end of the arms I cut a groove for the string to sit in. This is a bit more practical than the other curves, preventing the string from sliding off. Once I was happy with the shape, I used this arm as a template for the other. Using a thin flexible ruler I could then draw some lines for thinning out the arms. This will make the saw frame lighter, and I'd recommend doing this just for that reason, even if you don't cut any curves. At the end with the pinhole I want to keep the full thickness though, so to not make it too fragile. This waste was removed with a combination of previously used techniques. Returning to the upper ends with the notches, I rounded the edges here to make the wood more gentle on the string. Ash is a very hard wood, and I figured it's best not to have the string rub against sharp corners. Next up I went to work on the beam, and this is again a combination of decoration and weight reduction. I figured I don't want to go too fancy here. Any protruding details could catch on the workpiece mid-stroke, so I just gave myself some center lines and did some large straight chamfers, terminating in a sweep that flows into the curve of the arms. Alright, that's the frame, so now I need some handles. This is beech, a really nice wood for handles in my opinion because of how smooth it is. I squared it up quickly so that I could find the center, set up a divider from the distance from center to edge, and scribed that distance onto the diagonals. This is a way to accurately octagonalize a square blank with no maths. I sawed these facets and then cut away some thickness on the waist part for holding on to the piece while providing clearance for carving. This is going to become the front knob. Using the same techniques and the same stock, I made a straight handle with a hooked end and a toggle for twisting the cord that tensions the saw. Then I could drill these for inserting the brass pins. I mixed up some epoxy and glued the pins in place. By slipping a thin ruler into the blade slot, I could turn the pin to align it with the flats of the handle. Not necessary if you make a fully round handle on a lathe, but I want my octagonal parts to be in line with the blade. Then came assembly. The pins go through the arms and the arms go onto the beam. The blade holds it together on one side and I placed the assembly in a clamp while I ran the string around the upper ends. The toggle was inserted into the string and with a few twists the blade gets pulled taut. And here's how it cuts. This is with the blade installed for a push stroke because that's what I'm most used to. Let me know in the comments if you prefer a pull or a push stroke on this type of saw. Alright, there we have it. I am very happy with how this turned out. It's light, but it gets very stiff when put under tension. I think these octagonalized parts look quite nice and feels really good to hold. It gives a nice sense of the orientation. If you have a fully rounded, fully straight handle, you know, you can't really feel in your hand which way the saw is sitting, and of course with a big frame like this you can just look at it, but I still think it's nice to have that tactile way of feeling that you're holding it straight as well. The cutouts on the toggle, which allows it to swing like this to get out of the way, is very helpful. So yeah, thank you for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.